All right, namaste everybody. Welcome to the Foundation Method. I'm Cam, the host of the program, and we're back with another Transformation Sessions interview. And today I'm interviewing one of my dear mentors who's helped me on my journey to climb Self-Awareness Mountain and has been a big influence in my journey, Mr. John Nutting. And he's going to talk to us about his journey and his experience in life of what he practiced to get different levels of transformation to live well. And as he talks about it, climbing Self-Awareness Mountain, but I'm sure he'll talk to that in a bit. So yeah, just a little bit about how I met John. About 6 years ago, when I did my yoga teacher training, after a good 30 years of practice, I met a gentleman by the name of Keenan Crisp, who was talking about this emotional gym balancing during my teacher training. And he spoke to one of his mentors, Dr. John Nutting, who had mentored him in the process. Then later, when I was working with Duncan Peake, Duncan also spoke to John and John's work. And then later in a series of 12-step meetings, I'd heard other people speak to his work as well. And a gentleman was going to take me through the core belief balancing work, and he couldn't. And he said, well, you may as well just go and talk to the guy who, who's spearhead and driven it. And he's just over in, north side of Brisbane. And I said, oh, what's his name? And he said, Dr. John Nutting. And I was like, right, that's it. This is about the 4th time I've heard this. So I thought I'd better come and connect with John. And here he is today. So does that say, that sort of sound right, John? Is there anything?
Oh, Cameron, first of all, I want to thank you for the honorary doctorate, which I don't possess.
Sure, no problem.
But that's all right. I've been called Professor Nutting on a number of occasions. So I'll add that to my titles, yes.
Sure,
Okay.
sure,
yeah.
No problem.
I must admit, I have never been a good academic. And I don't think I'd ever have the strength or the discipline to do a doctorate anyway. So,
But you certainly, you made it through a couple of degrees there.
Oh, sure. And the biggest was the University of Life, which was my finest degree. You know what they say about the University of Life?
No.
Wonderful, wonderful curriculum, but lousy teachers.
Yeah.
Right. So there we go. Okay, Cameron.
Yeah, give us a little bit of I guess for the people that don't know you, a little bit of a rundown of John's story, of what brought you into teaching self-awareness.
And it was quite a long journey. I'm 85 years old. I'm still fortunately in reasonably good health. I'll say straight away that until I was 61, which is 24 years ago, I was not in good health mentally or physically. My life was it was just going down the gurgler, getting worse and worse and worse. But cutting back to the beginning, yes, I grew up on a rural farming property, did my primary schooling by correspondence, actually. Went to Gatton Agricultural College, where I was very lucky in that it was a very good scientific-based secondary education, not an academic one. And on things that were scientific, yes, I was very comfortable, yeah. Went back and worked on the cattle property for a couple of years. That was worse, a total disaster too. Then I joined the education department at age 21 and became a professional youth worker, but not your typical youth worker. This particular youth worker was part of an education department team that traveled to every rural community in Queensland, setting up these clubs known as junior farmers clubs, which were essentially a form of post-school education. And learned a lot, did a lot, spent 17 years there altogether. Got my degree finally with a major in psychology and political science. brilliant combination, actually. And went over to TAFE, found myself lecturing there in business psychology, management, business communication. Wrote a textbook called The Business of Communicating, actually, which was the first Australian text that wasn't written by an English teacher. And it was a major success because it was about business communication and not about spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Yeah. Then I moved on. I moved to the College of Natural Medicine, where I lectured for a number of years in communication for health practitioners. And all the time, my life was generally getting worse. My marriage was a disaster. I wasn't getting on well with my kids. And I had become a full-blown addict, not with substances, a process addict, adrenaline, the respectable addiction, workaholism. Yeah. And I finished up in a 12-step group, which was the beginning of my journey up Awareness Hill. And because I had this background in psychology, I thought I knew all about it. Those old guys in Codependence Anonymous who'd actually come from AA, and they started passing on some of their wisdom. It was simple, basic truth, and it made sense to me. And that got me started. I was lucky enough to, apart from being in a 12-step group, to go to America and do a week-long training at the Meadows in Arizona with Pierre Melody and Pat Melody and their team. And that really got me connected to inner child work, because the whole Meadows approach has always been that whatever the addiction you're on, you're medicating the pain of your wounded inner child. In other words, they don't call it an addiction, they just call it over-medicating. And they get 80% success rate with heroin, gambling, the biggies, yeah. Gambling, heroin, gambling, and what did I say? I said here, alcohol. I forgot alcohol. Yeah. So anyway, I sobered up, and that got me really starting to understand there's a heck of a lot that John does not even begin to understand about what's going on inside. And the connection with my inner child, who I call Little John, and the discovery that he was an absolutely real, genuine, powerful part of my team, and not just some sort of psychological concept. He was real. And after the 61 years, that poor little inner child at last got to talk and had a grown-up John to listen to him. Because you know what, Cameron? He'd been doing the work for 61 years. There was no grown-up John on board. So that was the beginning of, you could call it, I reckon he called it a transformation. Yeah. Then I got to work with Dr. Hal Stone and Dr. Sidra Stone, this most unusual couple in Mendocino in California, who were working on what today is now known as the psychology of the selves, or the psychology of the parts. Largely, they never went mainstream. And I think that's part of their philosophy, was that this is a gift from the universe. We learn to work with these parts, but we don't own it and we can't make any money out of it. Right. Today, Dr. Richard Schwartz is now the key figure in that area. He just published a new book called I've got it here. Just a moment. Can you hold on?
Sure. No Bad Parts. No bad parts. That's great.
No bad parts. Look, just skimming through it, it's exactly the same stuff. But he's probably just got a bit more of a sense of marketing himself in the places where you need to market yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is the voice dialogue work that you bring into the core belief balancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's unfortunate they ever called it voice dialogue. I think that sadly never caught on with people. And he talks about the psychology of their parts and the inner families, which sits more comfortably with people.
Right.
And he's now one of the key figures at, on the board of the Meadows, again, the Pierre and Pat Melody's place. And I just picked it up and thought, this is good stuff. I like it. And Hal Stone said to me, we don't own this. You can adapt it as much as you like. It doesn't belong to everyone. There's no intellectual property. And being an author, of course, yes, I finished up working on a book. And the book, in the middle of which I had a major heart attack and a quadruple bypass and a few other things. But even though I was working in the 12 steps, I was obviously still in a lot of trouble health-wise, and my marriage is going down the gurgler. But anyway, I met up with another guy from America called, mental block here.
Ricky Neuendorf.
Ricky Nemiroff. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah. And he introduced, because he was still very new in the field, he was working on core beliefs. And I said to Ricky, because every American who comes out here inevitably brings out a book to sell, well, this is good stuff, but where's the book? He said, I don't write books. Oh, okay. Well, I said, I'm just finishing a book called Growing Awareness, which is all about self-awareness, self-empowerment. I'd very, very much like to include some of your stuff in the book. He said, that's fine, as long as you acknowledge and attribute me as the bloke who started it off. I said, I'm happy to do that. So in 1998, when my book called Growing Awareness came out, it had a chapter on core belief work. And that was the first book in the world ever to publish any of Nicky Nemiroff's stuff. He still hasn't written a book. So then I knocked up a website called Core Belief Balance. And back in 1998, I got 1,000 hits in the first month. Now, these days, you just never get that on a new website. But obviously, there was nothing else on core beliefs. Okay, so I finished up writing a separate book about core beliefs. I like writing books,
Yeah.
And so today, I do inner child work. I do core belief work, both of which you've worked with me on. That's a great honor. Yoga people in particular seem to like the idea of saying that this is so much part of the whole body. It's not just a brain thing. And that resonates with me.
And that's something that we're going to be working on for this September coming.
Yes. So
exciting.
For the record, seeing we're on video, Cameron and I are working as joint presenters to present a course at a place called the Relaxation Centre in Brisbane. And the title is Life is a Total Body Experience.
Yes.
And the book's going to come out with Cameron's name on it, as well as mine as co-authors. Yep. We're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. I already suspect that Cameron's got the better half of the program, and I will happily sit back and say, well, I'll do my stuff, which is, Cameron's going to be going deeper into body energies.
And I think it's going to be a beautiful balance, having the core belief balancing, the emotional gym work, and some of the voice dialoguing work, and then balancing it with some, some physical practices that can help connect and help people self-regulate, so that there's just other tools in the box to, help them climb self-awareness hill and manage themselves, so that, so we can move forward and grow and grow up the hill of self-awareness, I guess.
We're both on the same page there. I've always been a believer in what I call do-it-yourself work. Self-awareness is self-awareness. Nobody else can do it for you, a person. And so whatever I do, I simply say, look, I'm just the conductor. I'll teach you how to play the music. I'll wave the button, but you got to play the music.
Yeah. And it is amazing to watch as well. It's very, very authentic process for anyone that hasn't done it or done any of the emotional gym work. It's undeniable.
I suppose we better explain emotional gym.
Yeah.
Cam, yeah. Okay. Yeah. All of us operate from different emotional ages. During the day, we go round and round the dial from sensible, thinking, rational. That's a fairly balanced emotional age. But sometimes we click back into stuff we learned in childhood, and those old patterns are still there. And that's very much what Richard Schwartz is saying. They're not bad parts. It's just they've been around ever since childhood. And because of that, they often are very childlike in their emotional overreactions. Now, one of the other things that I focus on always is that whatever there is going on around us, there are many forces, but all those forces are met by some kind of equal or opposite force. It's a law of nature. What does he call it? A law of, he says, he calls it the physics of the body or something like that. But this sense of, if you've got one particular pattern of behavior, a protector pattern on one side, and for example, I was working with somebody the other day and he's heavily into people pleasing.
Right.
He will do anything to avoid conflict. Don't rock the boat. Yeah, he learned that in childhood. He learned that to survive, that was how you did it. But that means that somewhere on the other side is a counterbalancing energy. We haven't met it yet, but it could be rebel. It could be fighter survivor. It could be illness, but something will be there to, or of course it could be alcohol or substances, whatever it is, something is there to counterbalance the because he's overdoing this, don't rock the boat, peacekeeper. He does not believe in naming the elephant in the room, you see. So, of course, the elephant is there too. That's another counterbalance. Anyway, so when that comes up with people, emotional gym is simply with 3 chairs. The one in the middle we call self-aware growing up part. On one side goes, we'll say in this case, the people pleaser or the doormat. And then on the other side is the opposite one. And then the emotional gym is simply getting physical movement from the middle over to one side, feel the different energy, connect to the peace, don't rock the boat energy, remember the childhood. That's on one side, leave that in that chair, back to the middle and over to the other side and feel the opposite, whatever it is. And that's up to the individual. Now,
energetic work in the way that, you don't have to cognitively think about what this other energy is. It's an exploration of the area around the chair until it appears in the body. And that's certainly been my experience of it. It's sort of very creative and intuitive as a process.
And it's using the whole body. Now, as you just remarked, if you tried to do it in your head, it would never work.
Yeah, that's where it gets stuck. the cutoff.
The rational mind says, how the hell could that help?
Yeah.
But because you've seen it happen so many times, as soon as people start doing it, they start to develop more awareness. And
yeah, it's a great process, and I've shared it with a few students and people that are wanting to learn that process, and it's just wonderful to watch people discover it for themselves.
It's simple, it's easy, it's definitely healthy, it's functional, and it's not therapy. It's simply, that's why I like to call it emotional gym. It's like I'm using this physical movement to strengthen the grown up self-aware part in the middle.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, John. It really is. It's wonderful gifts.
Yeah.
So look, I wanted to talk a little bit about your particular story, because there was a bit that you mentioned before, saying that up until you started your journey with the 12-step fellowship, that was where you felt you really began that conscious journey up self-awareness hill. And so because this podcast, or this video log, I should say, is really trying to keep it around what we practice to get the conscious movement or growth or transformation or journey up self-awareness hill, and then to get the side effect of living well. And so up until that point, you were saying maybe how would you reflect on the time before that? Before that time in your life, would you regard it as being unconscious or being driven by drivers that you weren't aware of, or how would you explain that? I guess the experience up until that point.
Good question. First of all, I would say it was extremely miserable life.
Right.
Remember, I was driven as a raving workaholic to work 80 or 90 hours a week, in the belief that this would somehow make things get better.
Yeah.
Or the expression that I talk about trying too hard. Now, when anyone is trying too hard, it means it's those childhood life patterns coming back in again and taking over. Because when we're little, there's not much logic and rationale going on, but as kids, we learn the harder we work, the more likely we are to get approval. And so in my case, I had taken that out far beyond the healthy level. But I was in an addiction, an adrenaline addict. Yes, the harder I worked, the less the pain. This must be good. I'll keep doing it. And if 60 hours isn't helping enough, I'll work 70. And if 70 isn't, well, I'll go for 80. Yeah. So that was life before. Now, you can imagine, of course, I didn't have much contact with my kids who at that stage were growing up as teenagers. I think they simply recognized that Dad was somewhere else. I mentioned that my marriage was just getting worse and worse and worse. And a lot of that hard work was actually trying to make the marriage a success. It was never, ever going to succeed. But and the other thing, of course, is, that I mentioned before, there was no grown-up John present. That's basically the way it was. These childhood patterns based on the fact that the harder you worked, the less trouble you got into. And that was my life. Well, it wasn't much fun.
What was it, John, that got you, I guess, because in 12-step programs, they have a saying, they talk about things like a rock bottom or a moment of, what do they call it? A sober.
Yeah, I know rock. I know, but I sure know about bottom. That.
Yeah. So what was the thing that got you to the point where you thought, I'm going to go to a 12-step program to look into this?
None of those. No, I didn't hit rock. I'd probably been bumping along rock bottom for 15 years.
Rock bottom was an elongated pathway by that.
It was a permanent state of affairs. Yes, in other words, and I think that's partly the difference between substance addictions and some other addictions. Well, no, because gambling is still hit rock bottom. No, I think you can say that with adrenaline addiction, it's not, it doesn't do as much damage because in fact the money keeps coming in. It's the damage inside, and I mentioned I had a quadruple bypass, total, major heart breakdown, which my therapist at the time said, actually, he said, what you have is a broken heart. And I think he was probably right. No, it was the beginning was the 12-step group simply bringing reality in to what was going on, and the realization that I was medicating in a child, the wound, a deep emotional wound inside. And adrenaline is a mighty good medication, but doesn't fix it, only numbs the pain.
Yeah.
So then I'll just say, once I went from there to working with little John, my inner child, I think that's the point when, I don't know whether little John worked out there was no growing up present, or whether it was the other people in the 12-step group, but somewhere along the line, there was no emotional gym in those days, but there was simply this realization that there needed to be a growing up somewhere to drive the bus.
And then, because, being a 12-step person myself, a very simple program of action, but I remember being in the rooms and hearing people talk to inner child work, or work they've done with a psychotherapist, or family of origin work and all of that type of experience, but they have to go somewhere else to get that insight and to do those practices. You mentioned, was it the Meadows where you first went to begin that particular work? And I guess I'm interested in what are some of the practices that you would do to investigate that awareness?
That the word investigate doesn't resonate.
I guess
I know. Let's say self-awareness is a process that involves the whole body. Investigating is a mental process.
Right. Okay.
In other words, no, my whole body had to start to tune into what was going on. And it was at that point that I met up with Hal Stone and Sidra Stone.
Right.
And see, they're the ones who developed emotional gym. They didn't call it emotional gym. They just talked about going to the opposite side backwards and forwards.
Right.
In fact, I don't think they even realized how powerful it was, but it was just one of the many things that they did. But to me, it's become one of the key. So I started doing emotional gym.
Oh.
And I think, again, what I've discovered over the years is, yes, it's the fastest way of getting grown-up self-awareness into a place where somebody says, yes, I know what it's like now. When I sit in that middle chair, I can feel the difference.
Well, can you give me a few, I guess, personal examples of when that practice started working for you? Like how did you know? Because I mean, it's easy to for us to talk about having had the experience, but for somebody who's watching this video who might never have had or not even comprehend the idea of having these different selves, like what are some real life examples that you had that that I guess triggered you to know, oh, this is working. I'm handling life differently. I'm able to engage my adult self rather than be run by the old beliefs.
I don't think there's ever been a sudden understanding like that, Cameron?
Oh no, I'm not meaning a sudden one.
No, well, no, even a realization.
Okay.
As you know, I'm an author. I write a lot.
Mm.
It's when I'm writing that it comes together. And a teacher, and when I'm teaching, it comes together. But all my life as a teacher, and I've never been an academic teacher, I've always been a hands-on practical teacher, you might say a trainer. I've found that as I pass it on to other people, it becomes clearer to me.
Right.
So it's not a sudden thing. It's simply a question of saying, the more you pass it on to others, the clearer it becomes to you. And you know that.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I guess for me, like an example would be, my old core belief being that I'm unsuccessful. Being that if once I've done a bit of the emotional gym, and once I did the balancing with you, I noticed that words that used to press the big red button to get the overreaction, that was dialed down significantly for me. So it meant that I could pause before the reaction that used to get me into this whole lot of trouble, where I'd say things that I didn't want to say and create up a mess that I didn't want to create. And I just got better with that the more I did the emotional balancing work. Was that similar? Did you have experiences like that?
The point is, I didn't have John Notting around to work with, did I?
No.
There was nobody.
Yeah.
I had to go to America to even do the basic inner child work and the self-awareness work. And that was only, for a few weeks at a time. I've always described myself as an explorer and an inventor. And I think it was more, if somebody's got a problem and I'm working with them, I try and come up with something that works. And sooner or later, this stuff works. So, yeah.
So there wasn't any sort of, because, some people say they have quite a significant light bulb moment where they realize all the practice was paying off. Something had changed. They weren't having the same quality of problems. I know after I did my 12-step program, once I went through the steps the first time, I know that the quality of my problems changed dramatically. I wasn't, engaged in the same sort of worries. That they became what they, 12-step people call good quality problems.
Yeah. There's definitely never been any sudden realization like that. It's a steady process. I describe it as climbing self-awareness hill. And what I do notice is that as I climb higher, the view gets better. So I can certainly look back many times and say, looking back now to where I was, well, we go back to my first 3 months in 12-step back in the late 90s. Yeah. Thinking, wow, I've just come so much forward in 3 months. This is amazing. And at 6 months, looking back and saying, you thought that was a leap way. Look at what's happened in the second and a year. Wow, fancy thinking at 6 months. And it's been like that now for 24 years. What I can simply say is I'm still climbing self-awareness hill. There's an old saying, he who says I have finished my climb has the toughest step just ahead of him.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I've finished. As I said, it's a good climb. The view's getting better and the swamp's getting further away.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions I like to ask is, how was your life becoming different, by doing these practices? And I think you've just described it. It's the view is getting better.
Yes. The last 24 years have been the happiest and the healthiest of my life.
That's great.
And that sort of sums it up as well, saying whatever's going on, it's working. Yeah. Now, now look, every so often I wake up in the morning and I have an insight about a particular phrase or something, and I think, I've never said that before. And I get onto the computer and I type it up quickly before I forget it. And from the number of times you've come to the Relaxation Center on a Thursday night and I said, oh, here's some new stuff I've just written. Yeah. That's how it comes to me more. I have a saying, I used to do a heck of a lot of public speaking, even from age 21 on. And I said, when you do a lot of public speaking, there's a part of the brain that thinks up the stuff for you. It writes the script. You don't even have to think about it. Now, I think for me, quite often, that's the way it works, that all of a sudden the realization actually arrives in the morning in the shower with something else that's worth adding to the next book. Yeah.
No, I have a similar, I call them downloads of information when I'm writing my music or thinking about, ideas for my yoga class or themes. They just pop in like little daydreams or little downloads. And then I'm the same. I have to put it on my phone pretty quickly. Otherwise it just disappears.
Yeah. So for me, that's the old story. I always say, all of us are individuals, and how we do it is individual. And I would not suggest that for everyone else that they say, oh, John's way is a good way, I must follow it. To each person, it's whatever works. Whatever works for you is what you do.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. That was one of the big takeaways from, I guess, the 12-step work was, although there's a set bunch of steps that are there, each sponsor is different. Each fellowship group is different, and everyone's recovery is completely different. And, so the processes that we go through that resonate with us, it's our own journey. And, but I can say from, the work that I've done with you, I've certainly learned a lot and found that the side effects of doing the work have been, a higher level of self-awareness, a deeper level of self-awareness in self-control in situations that used to trigger me. So that's from the core belief work. So that's been very valuable and very useful.
And that's what you needed, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I feel like, the evolving work as well that, that we're putting together is very exciting. And that's culminating into my first written works that'll be published. So it's very exciting times.
Yeah. I often say this is my one criticism of conventional medicine. Western medicine says, I've got a book and the book says that this is the right way and that's the wrong way. This is the right drug, that's the wrong drug. It's not. Unfortunately, everybody has a different book, and the doctor's book isn't the same as your book or my book.
Yep.
And a modern doctor is just an experimenter who says, well, we'll try this and see if it works, and if not, we'll try something else. But the classic doctor was, I know exactly what I'm doing, you will do what you're told. And if I say we're going to cut your leg off, I say, yes, doc, and he cuts the leg off. We know more and more that so often that was not the answer at all.
It's very much like the idea of modern yoga as well. Back in the olden days, it was one posture for every person. You had to master the posture. Whereas now we know that bodies are so uniquely different that it's about finding the right body medicine for the right person or the right posture. And that's a very unique exploration that something's best done one-on-one with somebody as well. There was one question that I had here that I think you've already answered, which was were there defining memories of, was life working, or was there I've done it? And you've already, I think, spoken to that, saying that, if you feel like you've mastered it all, then the next step is going to be the hardest. So like being an eternal student, that's always good.
Yeah.
But as far as
it's all right as long as I don't say I've finished the climb, everything will be okay.
Yeah,
It's only the one who says, I've finished my work, I've now reached nirvana. He's the one who's got the tough step ahead of him. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember somebody saying to me once in a meeting, be careful of when you say you're coasting, because you can only coast downhill. You've got to keep the foot a little bit on the accelerator.
Yes, that's a good point too. Yeah.
Keep doing a little bit of work and then it'll be all right.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, is there, I guess, a little bit of advice for anyone who's starting at the beginning of self-awareness hill, who hadn't had any of these experiences that we've shared and we've talked about tonight? Is there any, I guess, bits of wisdom or advice that you would pass over to help somebody begin their ascension of self-awareness hill?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is be aware of the dangers of black and white thinking, because so much conventional medicine, law, government, public servants, politics are all heavily loaded with black and white thinking. And that's a trick to stop us thinking for ourselves. And conventional religion, of course, yes. Our religion is the one that's good and all the others are bad. And straight away, the idea is to stop you thinking and just get you to come over to somebody's particular point of view. Old-fashioned doctors, very much that way. So anyone who's stuck in black and white thinking isn't even going to begin to get this stuff. That's probably the first bit of advice that I'd give anyone, to think carefully. There's another false understanding, and that is that somehow who I am and how much I matter is determined by everyone else outside there about me, about the universe. Not true. Who I am and how much I matter is my business. And so that alone will stop anyone from making progress. If they're waiting for someone else or something in the universe to tap them on the shoulder and say you're doing well, they'll never get it. So those two false ways of thinking are perhaps the biggest obstacles at the beginning. And sometimes it's not easy to shift them either, particularly if people have been brought up in a strict religious family. They've had it dinned into them from before they could even speak. They were still hearing the rules. So the alternative is to recognize that for every force, there is an equal and opposite force, whether you like it or not. And so if somebody says that thing over there is good and that thing over there is bad, then each of them has qualities, and it's important to examine what is it about the bad qualities that makes them bad. And so often, of course, it turns out that half the time the so-called bad one is the one that has the truth. So those are just off the top of my head, those are the first two. I think getting to know one's inner child is one of the most significant steps, because until you do that, you've got this incredible part living inside you that's not getting any attention. I mean, going back to conventional medicine, I used to have the most terrible headaches every day, virtually every day, right across the top of my head here, 6, 8, 10 aspirin a day just to function, which means if aspirin had been on the list of addictive substances, I'd have been going to Aspirin's Anonymous. But again, if anyone said, stop taking that aspirin, it's not good for you, I'd say, no, the headaches aren't good either. Anyway, the doctors did an X-ray and scans, and they said, you've got arthritis of the neck, John, and you'll have it for the rest of your life. You will be on painkillers. When I started doing inner child work and self-awareness work, they went away.
It's amazing.
It was not a medical condition at all. It was, I believe, that it was my inner child, little John, saying, I've been locked in here for 60 years and you won't even talk to me. Well, I've got ways of getting your attention. Because once we talked and embraced, and we talk now lots, and we have fun together, we do fun things. He settled down because he's got a grown up there. That's all he wanted, was a grown up to save him having to do all the work. Yeah. And I've done this with, I suppose, 1,000 people, brought their inner child back into their conscious life, where they talk to their inner child, love their inner child, play with them, protect them. And that's certainly one of the most profound shifts that anyone can do.
It certainly, yeah, it was very rewarding for me, especially because I got to buy my inner child, buy little Cam some great frisbees that glow in the dark, and I had a lot of fun. And so yeah, there was lots of good fun to be had.
Little John loves gadgets, and we can work. When I was a kid, little John and me, or both of us, we had a Meccano set, one of those things where you bolt things together, you know.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Now, for the last 20 years, I've been constructing my home out of steel framing. And guess what? You cut it and you drill holes and you bolt it together.
Yeah.
And little John has the time of his life. We've just been doing some in the last couple of weeks, you know. It's just a big grown-up set of Meccano.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's interesting. After my recovery journey myself, one of the things that usually can happen to a lot of artists is they lose their connection with music, because it's quite, you know, they don't have the medication anymore. They can't do the thing. I found it was quite the opposite. I grew a lot more in my music, became a lot more purposeful, a lot more enjoyable, and it's a big part of my life still. And I look back at some of my earliest photos around, you know, 6 and 7 years old, dressed in the Spider-Man outfit, entertaining the kids around the neighborhood, singing the Kiss songs from the radio and doing things. It's my inner child. Like little Cam's been performing since as early as he could. So, you know,
he was born to go into showbiz, wasn't he?
He loves it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a wonderful reconnection with all of that. So yeah.
So you'd understand, yes, that connection really enriches my life so much. Yeah. And little John comes out and talks to people, and you've seen him come out sometimes on Thursday nights. He just says, he's such, Cameron, the other thing that I wanted to just bring up is the work that you and I are into right now, which is the sense of a team inside us, which is mind, body, and heart and spirit, all working as a team. Now, this is part of my growing self-awareness. I'm on a new climb up the hill as we start to work on this stuff. But I think it's some of the best stuff we've ever done. And as it takes shape, you know, it's going to add more, it's going to enrich my life more. And that's part of what you brought in, which is to bring the heart in and the vagus nerve and everything else, and say,
that awareness,
and then spirit. And going back to the 12-step group, and the 12-step groups always recognized that our spirit and hope are part of what we need. Yeah.
And now more than ever. And yeah, so our first night of that workshop at the Relaxation Centre in Alderly in Brisbane is the 9th of September.
Correct.
The 9th.
Lockdown permitting.
Lockdown, well, everything. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And then that'll go for 4 weeks, and then if people are interested in carrying on and doing the advanced work, that'll be another 4 weeks after that. And they'll get the book that we're putting together and all the information in there.
With the cover.
Yep.
With Cameron James Brown on the title.
Yep,
Yes,
indeed.
yeah,
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 little Cam likes hearing that. He's very excited about that.
yeah. Oh, everybody should have a book with their name on the cover. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks, John. Well,
I've,
look,
I've,
I think we should wrap this one up because it's
okay.
nearing the hour, and I'm sure we'll do another one of these, and hopefully we can have a well. Let's have a chat about how the workshop went and what we learned from that after we've
Yeah.
done it. If you like.
Oh, for sure. You, little John and I love going on stage, love going on camera. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Um,
All
I thought we might also do one on emotional gym.
right. Great idea. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a wonderful
yeah,
idea. We should
yeah,
definitely put that
yeah,
together.
yeah.
So there's lots of things that we can work on, and Zoom's a wonderful medium to do it because it doesn't matter if lockdown happens or not. So
No.
that's wonderful.
Cameron, can I put in a brief plug for my books?
Please, yeah. And I was going
Yes.
to say, John, after we chat, so anything that we've talked about today, I'm going to put a few links in the comments in the YouTube video,
Oh,
including
okay.
John's website, including ways to find and interact with him. So all of that information will be in the links that I'll add. So you can have a look at his websites and get in contact with him, and then and yeah, please tell us about the books, the
Well,
upcoming books, John.
core belief balancing is my most successful one in this field. It goes all over the world, and it's designed largely as a do-it-yourself book. It's not like a textbook, it's like a magazine. It's full of diagrams and theme boxes and all sorts of things, but it works, and it's one that I'm very happy to make available to people on the through the internet as a PDF. Similarly, Love Your Inner Child. Again, things to do. It's all of them are do-it-yourself books. Those are the two, but the new one that's coming out is Cameron James Brown and John Blynutting. Life is a total body experience. So we'll add that to the book list too. Once we've got it completed, we've got about 5 weeks to finish it off, haven't we?
We'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be right on the night. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And for people that haven't done one of John's books before, I found it interesting. The self-examination questions were, for me, the how of the book. They were kind of getting me to reflect on different ideas. So that was kind of the practices that I got out of using the books, and it was very intuitive as far as being a do-it-yourself manual. So that you got a very strong aha. I had a very strong aha moment at the end of it where I learned about my core belief through the core belief balancing one, and it was a very authentic realization as well. So yeah, no, I can definitely.
Is that core belief, naming an old core belief and balancing it is certainly a big step forward. Well, what I call the forces, all the forces that we're dealing with. There are external forces and internal forces, and we've got to work with a whole darn lot of them. But the core belief is a powerful but negative force based on black and white thinking and a belief that all the power of who I am is decided by other people. And that's, of course, when we're little, that's often the case. It's so true, you see, but we're not meant to go on believing it when we grow up.
And getting in touch with that grown-up self so that we have a bit more power to make the decisions that we want, so that we can, activate the practices to essentially then live well. And as you've heard John's story tonight, past 25 years have been a major difference from the preceding times before that. So
it works if you work it.
Works if you work it.
Yeah.
It works it, so work it.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Okay. And for everyone at home, thank you very much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed what we've shared today, all the links to John and his work and his books will be in the comments. So please leave a comment, make contact with John if you want to do some work with him. And if you've enjoyed this episode, jump on to thefoundationmethod.com. I've got a free training on there where you can dive into 6 of the biggest problems and 6 of the great high quality solutions that I found on my wellness journey that should help you move forward, climbing self-awareness hill as John talks about it. So thanks very much for tuning in, and namaste, and we'll see you soon.